Baltimore Ravens signed Ethan Pocic on Friday to get their center position in order, and some key new details were revealed on the situation.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome in to the show. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire. On today's show, going to be talking about a Ravens season outlook with a clip that I do want to play and talk about because I think it is a really good one in terms of where Baltimore's kind of headed this year and, even context behind last year, which I think is important to talk about. So we'll get into all that. In the second part of the show, Eric DeCosta gave a Zay Flowers update when talking on 105.7 The Fan, so having some Zay conversation. But in the first part of the show, we all know what the big news of the day yesterday was. It was Ethan Pocic coming in to Baltimore, and there were some new details revealed on the situation. So let's dive into that here and right now. Again, Baltimore signing former Cleveland Browns center Ethan Pocic to a 1-year deal. It really solidifies the center position. He has started 97 games and is a longtime center. He'll be entering his 10th year this year and is somebody that is a solid center. He's not the top center in the league. He's not the worst center in the league. He's in the middle, and that's what I feel like is okay for the Ravens. Some new details, though, were revealed on the Ethan Pocic signing, and I want to start off with actually Jeff Zrebiec kind of gave some context to what the Ethan Pocic signing was for the Ravens. So on the Ravens signing of Ethan Pocic, Jeff Zrebiec said, quote, "Ravens have been on Pocic for a while. They brought him to Baltimore for a free agent visit on May 5th, the week after the draft. Recent positive health check on Pocic's Achilles recovery was the final necessary step." So again, Baltimore keeping tabs on him. Again, I don't remember hearing about the May 5th visit. Maybe that was put out and I'm just forgetting, but that's an interesting angle on that. So that's one part of it. The other part that Jeff Zrebiec said on it, he wrote an article and he actually gave the contract details. So not only did Jeff Zrebiec report that the Ravens had been in on Pocic for a while and they brought him for a free agent visit on May 5th, Jeff Zrebiec also reporting that the deal is a $3 million deal with an additional $1.5 million in incentives. So that brings the total, I guess, to a potential $4.5 million. That's in line with some of the other reporting that we got on it, that total of 4.5 with all that added up into it. And apparently here, Jeff also doubling down on the health thing, saying that recent positive health reports accelerated the Pocic agreement. So again, feels like this was something Baltimore had been keeping tabs on for a little bit based off what Jeff was saying there. And I think that, it's good that Baltimore was because, I think that while I had kind of come to terms with the fact that the center position was going to be there and the fact that Baltimore was probably going to go with Danny Pinter or Javon Glenn or Corey Bullock, I was like, all right, well, I guess I can live with it. I'm not as worried as I was, but still, and again, the options weren't great on the free agent market. It was really Pocic and Graham Glasgow. I mean, the fact of the matter is, you weren't going to get a Creed Humphrey, Tyler Linderbaum type player in free agency. Garrett Bradbury was also floated as a trade option. I had kind of mentioned Ted Karras potentially. I mean, these guys are all kind of in the same vein. And actually, Femi Ayan-Badejo ended up comparing, we talked about this on the live stream we did yesterday, Pocic and Bradbury, and Pocic wins out in overall offense grade and in run block grade. This is over on PFF, 63.8 offense grade for Pocic, 59.8 for Garrett Bradbury. Pass block grade is 62.2 for Pocic and 64.1 for Bradbury. And run block grade is 63.2 for Pocic and 55.9 for Garrett Bradbury. So again, I think all these guys are in the same vein. Pocic you get for free, though. There's no draft pick attached there. So that's one big factor in it. I think even if he gets everything and it can go up to $4.5 million and he gets that, I think that's fine for a solid center. He stands at 6'6". Tyler Linderbaum was a lot smaller than that. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see kind of how Baltimore goes about having their, a big center. Linderbaum was undersized for the position. Pocic certainly is not, which, I'm not necessarily sure Baltimore was like going out and trying to find another undersized center. I think that they wanted some size at that spot. Not that having Linderbaum was a bad thing being undersized because he was very good, but Pocic is he's a different player than Linderbaum is. But it really rounds out, like, this was the last big glaring roster hole. Pocic probably wasn't their first choice or anything like that. As we talked about before, they made it pretty clear they wanted one of those top two center options in the draft. I'm sure they would have loved to have Linderbaum back at less of a price than he went to Las Vegas for. But I think it all worked out for him. The health stuff is a concern. He did tear his Achilles in December, and he has not played in a full season since his rookie year back in 2017. He has suffered multiple big-time injuries. And actually, let me try to pull up his injury chart real quick. He had the torn Achilles in week 14, but then he also had, other stuff pop up as well where, you can't, okay, here's what I'm trying to say. You cannot ignore the health stuff with Ethan Pocic, right? But you do not have the center depth there. Like, whoever was going to start at center for Baltimore this year is now your backup, and then he can come in and be that guy if Pocic goes down, and knock on wood it doesn't happen. But okay, it could, like in 2019, for example. That year was when Pocic only played in 4 games. He had back issues, right? He was placed on injured reserve in October with a back injury, and then he was placed back on injured reserve after being activated just a couple weeks later. He suffered a knee sprain in 2021, and he had another knee injury in week 11 in 2022. It's there, I'm not expecting, and that's kind of what you have to assume. This goes back to the Julio Jones conversations we used to have with the Ravens. And I'm sure that the medical stuff, like what Jeff was saying there, and how the positive updates and, all that helped with that, because we got that report a couple days ago that he was full go, he was cleared. And I'm sure that did accelerate the process like Jeff talked about. But, when we talked about Julio Jones potentially coming to Baltimore, never ended up happening, obviously. But, I was talking about how, look, if Julio comes to Baltimore, you have to assume that he misses games, and you have to respond and react to that before it actually happens. And while Baltimore already had these guys on their roster, assuming that Pocic doesn't play in all 17 games this year, which, again, he has not played in a full 17-game season ever. He played in 16 games back in 2017, which back then was a full year. Now it's 17, so he's missed time here and there. An Achilles injury is not easy to come back from. It's different recovery times for different people and different feelings for different people when they get back on the field. But you have the options now in the room. If Pocic doesn't play a full 17, Pinter is your backup option, or Gwen or Bullock, whoever it is, because, again, I think Pocic is going to be your starting center. I think they brought him in to do that, assuming everything checks out health-wise and whatnot. But now there's also a competition. I think there'll still be some level of a competition for the starting job, but now you're also competing, hey, who's going to be the next man up? Who's going to be first man off the bench? That's a really big deal, because you always have to stay ready in that situation. And now I don't think all 3 of those guys make the roster, right? I don't think Pinter, Gwen, and Bullock all make it. I think someone's going to get cut now, and maybe they try to get a guy back on a practice squad that way. But, there's all these domino effects from a move like this. But again, I think it's a very, very solid one for Baltimore. We're excited to see how he plays in Baltimore for sure. Coming up to the second part of the show, we'll keep talking about Pocic, but we'll also, after that, dive into Eric DeCosta giving a Zay Flowers update. Stay tuned when coming up on the show. This episode is sponsored by FanDuel. On the biggest stage in the world, FanDuel is changing the game, because sometimes your player gets subbed off and your bet goes with them. Not anymore with FanDuel Super Sub. If your player is subbed out, your bet stays in. That's right. If your player leaves the match, your bet continues on with the substitute, so you're still in it until the final whistle. In matches like these, anything can happen, and now your bet can go the distance. Let there be goals this summer on FanDuel. And right now, it's the World Cup final. Sunday is when the game actually is. And over on FanDuel right now, Spain is minus 148 and Argentina is plus 128. I'm expecting a really, really good game. And there's nothing worse than having a great pick going and watching your player get pulled in the 60th minute with Super Sub. That bet doesn't die. It goes the distance with the sub. Let there be goals this summer on FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/LOCKDON to get started now. Moving along, Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on the Saturday bonus edition of the show here on Locked On Ravens. Thanks so much for being here and making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, now the #1 sports podcast network. We have you covered here with 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage twice per day, 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. Eastern time, Monday through Friday. Plus, we have bonus episodes like this on the weekend. We have instant reactions. We have watch-alongs, the squad show, and so much more here. So let's keep talking about Ethan Pocic. I feel like Baltimore, because I've seen a pretty generally solid reaction. Like, people feel pretty solid about this move is what the consensus feels like to me. I do know there are people that don't really love this move because of the injury history. And I understand that because it is a really big concern. And again, like, if this is the move and like this is where you're investing the money, and then he goes down, you're essentially back to square one, and that money is tied up. Now, I do think that the Ravens could pivot if Pocic does go down. But again, he's going to be 31 in just a couple of weeks. He's 30 right now. He is not young by any stretch of the imagination, right? And so I think the worry there is like, and I'm no doctor, right? But it feels like with an Achilles injury, sometimes when it happens, because for example, and I mentioned this on the live stream, and I think it is a good example, so I want to say it again. Like Teddy Buchanan, Eric DeCosta talked about on his interview with 105.7 The Fan, which we'll get to in just a couple minutes here, that Teddy Buchanan has had like a 1% rehab. Like, he's been in that top percentile of like best rehabs he's seen in his 30 years. Teddy's really young still, right? Ethan Pocic is not that young. Now, it's not saying he can't come back, can't be explosive, I'm not saying that whatsoever. Like, we just don't know. I think it's the unknown, which is kind of the nerve-wracking part of that, especially with all the other like knee injuries adding up and, the back stuff and everything along those lines. That is a big concern point. I'm not trying to gloss over that, but I don't know. I just feel like free agency wise, there were definitely not other options. And, like Glasgow would have been the other option for center. And, they're both kind of similar players, in my opinion, in terms of like skill level and how they would impact the offensive line. But, at the same time, like the Bears would also have to be willing to trade Bradbury. And we don't know if like they would want to or what the asking price is. So and I mentioned this at the very end of the live stream, but I didn't actually I guess I want to say it here on this show as well, or getting him in before training camp is a huge deal. If they had waited to see if Pinter or Bullock or even Ioane were like their guy, and it wasn't, and that didn't happen, and it became, oh, we don't know who our guy's going to be. These guys aren't it. And you're already like 3 weeks into training camp. You gave them that runway. You have to get the guy in first of all, and then get them up to speed. I think for me, them bringing him in now lets him learn with the rest of the guys day one of training camp. Like, boom, hit the ground running. I think that is a really important aspect of it as well. So, like, this was the last move that I feel like Baltimore really needed to make. As the months had went on, I was kind of like, okay, feels like it's not going to be a thing. But apparently they had been doing their homework and quietly keeping tabs on him. And here we are. The Ravens signed Ethan Pocic, and I am very excited that he is in Baltimore. Gives him a solid option again with your elevated guard play. You're downgrading at center here with Linderbaum out and Pocic in. But at the same time, again, I think the guard play is going to kind of just wash out some of that, right? Like, just because you're going to have better play on either side of you, like Linderbaum, as I've mentioned before, he had to do 3 jobs in one last year at times. Like, that's how bad who he was playing next to, and Falele and Voorhees were doing their jobs. So I think if Ioane can be the player we all think he can be, if Simpson can just be solid too, right? Clean up on the penalties. It'll make Posic's job so much easier. And it's great for Lamar Jackson too, because I think with this line in general, he's not going to have to worry nearly as much as he did last season, which is always good for him in terms of having confidence to sit back in that pocket and know that the guys in front of him are protecting him from danger. So Ravens get their guy, and I really guess this was their guy because they were keeping tabs on him for months. But here we are now in the Ravens from left to right. You know, my projected starting offensive line for him: Ronnie Stanley, John Simpson, Ethan Pocic, Vega, Ioane, and Roger Rosengarten. Pretty good. At least a lot better than it was last year, right? And I say that again because the guard spots are elevated. I understand Linderbaum to Pocic is a downgrade, but I'm that bullish on Vega, Ioane, I guess, right? That's how much of an upgrade I think that will be, which in turn will help the entire group out for sure. Let's talk about Eric DeCosta talking about Zay Flowers. You know, I think the big conversation about Zay Flowers is, will there be an extension before the season begins? And that's kind of been my thought process, is that, you know, everyone's talking about Lamar's extension and when that's going to happen. I think Lamar's extension is happening after the season, right? I'm pretty convinced about that, just based off of, you know, kind of what has happened in the past, right? I don't have any information on that. I just that's my gut feeling. But my gut feeling is that something will get done with Zay. Again, no information on it. It's just my gut feeling. And Eric DeCosta was on 105.7 The Fan with Vinny Serrato and Cordell Woodland. And he was asked by Cordell about Zay Flowers and if an extension was something that he'd like to get done with Zay before the start of the season. And Eric DeCosta said, quote, "Definitely. I love Zay. Zay wants to be here. We want Zay here. We've had good conversations. Certainly a work in progress. Optimistic about it. Feel like at some point we'll get it done. I hope it gets done. We love Zay. Zay's a phenomenal football player, and his energy is infectious, and I expect him to have a great year." And I think that might be one of the reasons they hope they get it done, is because if Zay has a great year, you know that price is going up. You know that's going up. So that might be one of the reasons that they actually want to get the deal done, is because they want to get him before he has that break, which I expect him to have it as well. Zay has had 3 really great seasons in 3 years in the NFL. He's improved every single season, and I think that's going to continue. That trend's going to continue this year. And so with wide receivers signing big money contracts, price goes up. Zay has a great year, price goes up. I think that they can come to a fair agreement. That's what I want. I want a fair agreement for both sides. Zay absolutely deserves to get paid what he's worth. The Ravens, hopefully for their side of it, can get a deal where they feel comfortable, where they can, it's not going to completely hinder them with that contract, right? But Zay definitely deserves to get paid. And just bringing up NFL wide receiver contracts real quick, just to talk about it. NFL wide receiver contracts. Let's bring it up. Right now, Jackson Smith-Njigba in Seattle averages that $42.15 million per year. I don't think Zay's getting in that range. I don't think he's getting the JSN, Jamar Chase range. I think Drake London is probably where you start. I don't expect him to get more than Drake London. If he did, it wouldn't necessarily shock me because of just the market, but I would probably project Zay out more in the Amon-Ra St. Brown to CeeDee Lamb range, anywhere from $30 to $34 million. So let's just say 32. 32 would put him right with AJ Brown. So I would honestly not be surprised if he pushed for 33, because DK Metcalf is wildly apparent. Okay, DK Metcalf is at $32,999,882. That is very specific. I don't know why it is like that, but I would expect Zay to be like, "Hey, let's just get a flat 33. Let's just beat DK out by that $128 or $118." That's such a weird number for DK, but my prediction right now would be 33. I'd say it's a 4 or 5 year deal worth $33 million a year. Obviously, you're backloading that contract. I don't know what the guarantees are, but that's why, that is the reason why it's a work in progress. And, there's a lot of different things that have to go into a big deal like that. And remember, when the Ravens paid Lamar Jackson the first time, they had never dished out a contract like that before in their history. So there was a lot of new things for them. And it's kind of a similar conversation with Zay, because they've never paid a receiver as much as they are going to have to pay Zay. But kind of like what DeCosta talked about, like Zay's comments about Baltimore, very much so feels like he wants to be here. The Ravens have made it very clear they want Zay to be in Baltimore, including these comments from Eric DeCosta here. So I do think that something is going to get done. My gut is telling me before the season. My gut has been right before. My gut has been wrong before. I mean, it's just a hunch I have. But Zay absolutely deserves to get paid. And again, like, you get him paid now and you lock him in for that number, and that number is what he is locked in at, then you are going to, again, because like when Puka Nacua signs a deal or when all these other guys, even if you're not going to get in that range, it still impacts everybody in the secondary tier, third tier, fourth tier. All of that matters. And plus the salary cap's going to go up. That's going to impact it as well. It is definitely within Baltimore's best interest to get the deal done sooner rather than later. And if Zay wants that long-term flexibility, that security, then, you know, it'd work for him too. But again, it's about what both sides want. It's about what the Ravens want, and it's about what Zay wants. It's about them coming together to an agreement. And I'm hopeful as well that it will get done. Coming up on the final part of the show, we'll get into a clip about the Ravens season outlook and talk about where they currently stand. So stay tuned, buddy, coming up on the show. Continuing on, Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Saturday bonus edition of the show. Thanks so much for being here on your weekend, on your Saturday, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. If you have a friend or a family member who's a Ravens fan or wants some daily Ravens coverage, be sure to send them over here our way on Locked On Ravens. We have them covered just like we have you covered on the show. And if you want to follow me on social media, you can at CashRicker34 on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, the whole 9 yards. Hopefully everybody is having a great weekend so far. And again, thanks so much for spending some time with me here on it. But let's get into a clip here from Michelle Magdziuk over at the NFL Big Board, the Locked On NFL Big Board. And she had comments on the Ravens and where their outlook stands, kind of context behind her thoughts on the team. I thought it's a really good clip with a lot of awesome context. So I want to play the clip itself and then react to it on the other side.
Number 4, I'm going with the Baltimore Ravens. Bad season for them last year. Finished 8-9, didn't make the playoffs, but I think they bounced back big time this year and can be one of the best teams in the league. Lamar Jackson missed 4 games last year. The offense just didn't look like it was completely driving all year long. The defense was subpar at best, and that doesn't really make sense with the talent they have across the board there as well. But we know one thing about Lamar Jackson. He is a winner in the regular season. 76-31 record as a starter. That's the 5th highest quarterback win percentage since at least 1950 among quarterbacks with at least 100 career starts. And they've only missed the playoffs twice with Lamar Jackson as their starter since 2018. And in both of those games they missed, Lamar Jackson had an injury that year. But I'm excited to see what they can do with their new head coach, Jesse Minter. I think John Harbaugh is a good head coach. I think it was time to get fresh blood there in the coaching room. And Jesse Minter offers a really exciting new defensive play caller for them as well. The Chargers defense was fantastic under Jesse Minter, and I think he's going to have better playmakers to work with the Ravens. And then they also signed Trey Hendrickson this year to help out their pass rush. They didn't have Matabuke last year either. He suffered a neck injury in week 2, missed the rest of the season. So he's expected to come back. That'll be a huge guy in the middle of their defensive line to get back. I think the offense is going to look really good. Even if they lost Tyler Linderbaum, they added a couple guards to help out with the interior offensive line to improve there. And I trust Lamar Jackson to figure it out. I like the hire of Jesse Minter. I think this defense can be one of the best in the league. And I think the offense will improve from last year. So Ravens 8-9 last year. I'm not going to be shocked if they win 13 games this season. I'm really liking them. And if not, then maybe we have to have a discussion about this Ravens team and Lamar Jackson in general. But for now, Lamar is still playing at an elite level. And I trust him to figure it out to come back next year and bounce back this team.
Yeah. So, I mean, what Michelle was saying there, and I don't know if that was just on my end where the video, like, it played the audio, but the video was just a frozen screen. I don't know what that was. I'll have to figure out if that was just on my end in editing or if that was for the show. So if you're watching on video form and that did happen, I apologize. Audio doesn't matter. The audio came through, and I thought what she said was great. You know, I think that for the Ravens, it is about just trusting Lamar Jackson. You're bringing in Jesse Minter. Everything's kind of aligning for you, right? Trey Hendrickson, like you're getting so much just coming together for you this season for Baltimore, where I think that their season outlook is very positive, and I do trust Lamar Jackson. Like it does kind of, it doesn't fall on his shoulders in terms of like it's all his responsibility. Like obviously it's a team game. Like Lamar is not the only one responsible for the Ravens' success. He is a huge part and probably the biggest reason for the Ravens' success. But you're now putting him in a more successful position overall with, I think, a better coaching staff, a better offensive line, and a defense is going to help him out too. Hopefully get him the ball back more often in plus field position and plus territory, give him shorter fields. And that, I think, in turn will take some pressure off of him and just put him in better situations overall. I mean, how many times did, like, for example, Jordan Stout have to save this team last year because, you know, like either the offense couldn't do anything and that was bad, or the defense, like, again, like there were so many different times where a single player, whether it was Stout, Lamar, someone else, had to save the Ravens. Kyle Hamilton had to save the Ravens, and it was put on their plate to do a lot. And I think that now for where they are with the additions that they have made, yes, they did lose a lot of pieces, but I do think that whether it was the coaching hires, free agency, the draft, like you did so much good to your roster, to your organization, flipping over this leaf, turning a page. And that in turn is going to really help them, I think, get off to a faster start this year, continue through the trenches and everything along those lines where you needed to build through. We knew they needed to add offensive linemen. We knew they needed to add defensive linemen. Like they did that. They attacked that hard this offseason, which is exactly what they needed to do. That was the message that I think they were sending, and they delivered on it. It was the message everybody was talking about. We talked about it, and they delivered on it. And so I think with the star power you already have, the additions you've made, and the coaching staff, which I already think has the full confidence of the players, like that's a scary thing. And with the AFC, in my opinion, being wide open, like there's not a Rams in the AFC, you're going to have so much there, so much for the taking. It's not a guarantee. You got to play the games, right? And it can't just, it's not on paper. But with the signing of Pocic, for example, like you have addressed like every big hole on your roster. Like you have, you can still add maybe a depth linebacker. You can, if you want to, add a veteran wide receiver. I don't really expect them to, but you could. But at the end of the day, like Baltimore is in such a good position right now where I do think that like this team is going to surprise a lot of people this year. I will not be surprised if they have a very successful, like maybe AFC championship run, Super Bowl run. I'm not like guaranteeing it or like, you know, saying, oh, it's definitely happening. Like, of course, like I said, you got to play the games on the football field, but this team is motivated. This team has made the necessary additions. And I really like what Michelle had to say there. So I apologize again. I mean, I'm going to find out in editing if it was the video just on my feed on the streaming or if it was the actual clip. I don't know what happened for me there. I threw it into my software, exported it, put it in here. Maybe I did something wrong, but again, what she said, the audio, that's the most important part. And what she said, I thought was very, very relevant. And look, I'll just come down, just trust Lamar Jackson. That's what it comes down to. Just trust Lamar Jackson. I trust Lamar Jackson to put this team in a successful position and to be there for them and to step up this season even more. And I'm excited to see what he can do, especially with all this list season and list stuff coming out and all the motivation I'm sure you might get from that. But we know Lamar also just kind of goes to the beat of his own drum, and he's going to just vibe out regardless. So I'm liking the vibes this season for the Ravens for sure. That's all I have here today, though, on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. On the right, be sure to like and subscribe button in video form and follow along, subscribe in audio form for 5 days a week, plus more of daily Ravens coverage and content coming up. We'll be back here maybe for some more bonus episodes over the weekend for their headlines, but if not, we'll be back here on Monday talking more Ravens football with you. So be sure to stay tuned, and I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.